Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help you reclaim good intimacy with God. My name is Tony, and I'm your host. I'm excited today to have a very dear friend of mine, Charlie McMahan, with me. Charlie is the leader of a movement here in Dayton, Southbrook Church, and more specifically, he's the author of a brand new program designed to help athletes, artists, and academics deal with the stress of their life, specifically students. And what I'm talking about is Players Box, helping students perform under pressure. I love this conversation. We talk about his vision for the church, about how he connects it all together, about how to take our scars and turn them to stars. And man, it's a good, refreshing idea about how we can walk alongside students. And if you love this conversation with Charlie, I want to invite you to come be a part of our Miami Valley Fellowship of Christian Athletes banquet. That's right. April 3rd at Southbrook Church, Charlie McMahan, Pastor Charlie's going to be the keynote speaker at the Miami Valley FCA banquet. To learn more about the banquet, to get connected to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes ministry, I want to invite you to check out their website, miamivalleyfca.org. miamivalleyfca.org. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with pastor, Players Box author, and movement leader, Charlie McMahan. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited today to be here with the lead visionary and catalyst of Southbrook Church, Charlie McMahan. Charlie, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome, Tony. I really have so much respect for you.
Oh, thank you.
And what you've done and what you're doing, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
And so I want to start with talking a little bit about COVID and the church, because you're the lead pastor of a big movement here in Centerville, my hometown, and you and I have met numerous times over the pandemic. How is your church? How is your heart in light of COVID?
Well, 38% of pastors coming out of this say they're done.
Yeah,
and I think that's very defining. That says that the price has been too high, and I'm done. 38%.
That's wild.
It is, and that is just one metric on how much the game has changed. The metrics themselves have changed. I feel like our church is doing well, but if you only use attendance as a metric, we're half the size we were 2 years ago. We're 80% of what we were in financial resources. So that's just one metric, but it is the rules have been changed. Not so much now, but for a year and a half there, 2 days was a long-term plan.
Yeah.
You made this decision, and oops, the governor had a press conference, and now that's changed. And wow, you've had to change so much. We decided to reboot the church, so we really made some big changes while we could do it, because it needed to happen. In a changing culture, it needed to happen, and it takes a toll. It does, I think I told you earlier. My soul is tired.
Yeah.
I feel a weariness of soul. So, So I'm okay, but I would rather be doing this at 60 with my experience than at 30 with the energy I had then. The experience is really paying off on what not to panic over. And
so you've got a lot of young staff. I mean, Southbrook is really known for its young, innovative staff. How has it been mentoring and shepherding and discipling this young, innovative, super high-performing team through the great slowdown, the great resignation, the great freak out? I don't even know what to call it.
Just go on, keep going. Well, it's just, so we have two dates that were catalysts. 9/11, our church doubled in one weekend after 9/11. We went from 1,000 to 2,000 literally in 1 week and never looked back. 3/11 was the complete reversal of that. So exactly. So it was the un-9/11 in the sense that it was totally a dispersion of gathering in every way: bars, restaurants, churches, everything that had to do with gathering. So the good thing about having a younger staff is the generation they're part of was already leaning toward not centralizing everything into one gathering, and so that's worked really well. And very useful. But even they have had to be very pivoting, right? And just because you're 30 doesn't mean you're flexible.
That's true.
It doesn't. It's more personality type than it is age. And they've had to be very, very flexible. I think it was probably useful that I was at the helm just because at my age, Again, I can't tell you how I've never been more thankful for my experience in dealing with so many different things for, 7 years in ministry. So it's good. I'm glad they have the energy. However long I would have lived 5 years longer like a lot of pastors if this hadn't happened.
Sure.
Sure. I think it's aged all of us.
Now, one of the interesting things that you guys are doing, I don't know if we're coming out of COVID yet. I don't even know how to classify it, so I'm not even going to try.
When we think we're coming out, we're going back in.
Right. Yeah. But you're the only church I know that just launched a capital campaign, a multi-million-dollar capital campaign. Yeah. I know some church plants who are growing now and are going to buy property because they're cash rich. Mm-hmm. But I've never, in all the churches I know, I don't know any other movement that's seemingly doubling down on what they're trying to do. And it feels like Southbrook is drawing a line in the sand. I'm wondering if you might tell us a little bit about how you came to that conclusion and got your board on board.
Yeah. So a year ago, they really weren't. They were like, what? Are you crazy? And then we said, but if we start this in the fall of 21, we think that culture will be ready for it. So as you know, 5 years ago, I started teaching the Players Box, as it's called, in 2011, and then we brought it into our ministry here 5 years ago. And the Players Box mission is to help students perform under pressure. And the imagery of, as in many sports and theater, the player's box, the performer's box, where the friends and family sit. So we started this in equipping students for pressure and parents for how to not put pressure on their students, unduly putting pressure. And we realized that this works. This is meeting students where they are, and it is changing student ministry. Whereas student ministry in America has been, come to our building and we'll show you Jesus. This is, we're meeting you where you are. Many of you academically, artistically, and athletically are feeling intense pressure, and you don't know if you have what it takes to meet the standards of either your school, your family system. And so we are equipping students with the tools that they can use. And by the way, as we do that, we're building a relationship. It is the strongest discipling, leadership development reality we have, because what has happened is we've been able to pour into students that we would have never had a connection with had we not done this. So we said, okay, let's double down, and we're turning our facility into a Players Box facility 6 days a week is when this is done. So there will be an arts center, there will be an athletic center, and there will be an academic center, and that's what this capital campaign. And as always, vision, money flows to vision, and people know the need with this one. This
Yeah.
one has not been very difficult.
It's not
to
a hard
say
sell.
it's not a hard sell. To say there's something wrong and we're going to do something about it. We're not looking to say, hey, somebody got to do something about this. We're going to be the ones that do something about it. And so in many ways, it has been challenging because half the people heard the vision that would have heard it 2 years ago. But in another way, the ownership has been tremendous. We've had over 300 families commit, averaging about, I think we're up to 3.7 million of our $4 million goal to commit.
Wow.
So it's over 10,000 per family over 3 years, and that's just extraordinary. And it's all about the vision. It's all about they get it. We have got to help kids, and we've got to help parents help the kids.
Yeah, because it's one part mental health, and then it's another part relationship building, or is it really one and the same? Or how would you give a 10,000 view of what the player's box is?
So right now the program exists right now in increments of 6-week trainings where we break down the play curriculum, PLAY, personality type, learning style, ability level, and yes factor. And each of those has a very specific implication. Personality type will tell you your relationship to pressure. Learning style will tell you how you practice or process. Ability level tells you your purpose. Why are you doing this dance? Why are you playing volleyball? And yes factor affects your positivity. So they have a very specific, you got to know this because this very critical issue is going to be affected. Pressure, practice, purpose, positivity. And so there is this element of it that's seminar, we do 6 weeks training, but the real power of it is when I teach for about 10 minutes at each one, and then it's the tables. And we have coaches at each table, and there's 6 to 8 kids. Middle school has their own session. High school has their own session. While that's going on, parents have their own session on here's what you need to know. Let's process this together. So it is a information and transformation of relationship that's happening at the same time. When the facility's done, we're going to take it to like a 6-day-a-week level. I mean, you'll be in your group meeting however many times you can meet. It won't just be limited to 6-week seminars at a time. And the big component of it that is both relational and informational is as soon as a high schooler says, I really get this, we turn them into a table leader for the middle school. So it is a magnificent leadership development engine. And in an era when people can't figure out student ministry anymore, it seems like in America, we're turning away people to be coaches for this. People want to be involved in this. We've stumbled onto something.
Now, a lot of this is born out of your story, and particularly with your son, Austin, but with your daughter, too. I'm wondering if you might share a little bit about how, this feels like God's big redemption of what was a lot of family pain that you've been very open about. Yeah,
so God turns our scars into stars for his use, right? That's what he does. And I was a college athlete, accomplished, small college, All-American. My daughter comes along. She's really athletic in dance, and my son Austin comes along. He's really athletic in, unfortunately, the same sport I was, basketball. And both of them crashed and burned, partly because of external pressures that were put on them, but also internal pressures within our family. My wife and I both run pretty hot when it comes to, I'm a 3. She is a 9 with a strong 3 using the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So she has an 8 wing to her. And so anyhow, both of us are pretty intentional people and didn't realize how much pressure we put on our kids. Not because we ever said, hey, you got to be great. It wasn't that. It was that they saw us. And it nearly killed both of our kids, literally nearly killed them.
I'm curious. I mean, I've heard you use the term performance-based household, and I now I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. with a 7-wing, and I know that I have this tendency. Like, how do we realize when all of a sudden we're running? I mean, because you guys are great people.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't.
Yeah, we're not
anything-
evil. I don't think we're evil.
No.
Even though somebody would think, some people would think so. We're really not.
No, there was no decision one day to be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to teach our kids that the only way that they'll receive love from us is if they perform
No.
specifically athletically, right?
Yeah.
How does that happen? I know somebody's listening and they're freaking out right now.
Well, for us, it was being able to look back and see a trail had blood on it.
Yeah.
You know, for a family that's listening to this, I would say this: if you are in any way an accomplished person, we call it a high functioning family. Your student feels pressure because they don't know yet whether they have the wherewithal, the giftings to meet the unspoken family expectation. So you take a kid in our area, it would be very typical. One parent works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The other parent works at LexisNexis, a comfortable income. And you're not expected to get a 22 on your ACT in this family. You do understand it. That's never said.
Right.
But that child's going, oh my gosh, what happens if I get a 22 on my ACT? When anything less than a 30 is really not acceptable. There's a pressure on that now has been accentuated because in this era, that pressure never leaves due to these little things we hold in our hands that we talk into and do all kinds of things with. And so what's different about this era is in my era and your era, there was not the proximity to that constant pressure like there is now, and comparison. And so one of the things I tell parents is if you're high functioning, which doesn't mean that you're better than, it just means you function pretty well, you got a college degree, assume the temperature in the room goes up for your child when you come into it. Oh, no. Yes, it does. The temperature in the room goes up. Because they mean love. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean they don't respect you. That doesn't mean they don't have affection for you. But there is an expectation that we want you to default to having that assumption. And so your task in many ways may seem counterintuitive. You have to lower the pressure. Wait a minute, then Jimmy won't be everything he can be. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll be alongside Jimmy to help him, is what we're saying. Be a whole being, that if he does achieve that, he does it as a whole being. If he doesn't achieve that, he does that as a whole being. But largely parents are very unaware until 5 minutes too late. And we were that 5 minutes too late.
Wow.
And so I said in 2011, I'm not going to let this happen to another kid if I can do anything about it. And so I started writing the play curriculum, PLAY, and then we put that together. We refined it. We're still to this day, we're doing a 12-week session with a local high school basketball team right now where we're refining it even more. Why? It's because parents need help, and some of them don't know it.
Yeah. How do you respond when a parent says, hey, I can't come to the player's box for the parents' part, but I think it's good for my kid because he's obviously super nervous or she's obviously super nervous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it feels like when I was in sales, we call it a one-legged presentation.
Yeah, so good. I will say, if the opening comes, I will say this. Now, you remember that we can't resurrect what you're putting to death. So the reason why we really encourage the parental involvement, and I think it's the biggest impact we have, is not on the kids, it's the parents, is for that reason, is the person we have to impact most is you. It's not your child. Caesar the dog whisperer, we use one of his maxims a lot where he said, I don't train dogs, I rehabilitate dogs. I train dog owners. And we tell people we don't train kids. We rehabilitate kids. We train parents. Well,
the last time you were on my podcast, we talked about the 3 questions to ask your kid after every game. And I'll tell you that that conversation that we had about kids' anxiety in sports had a drastic impact on me because I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to use your term, turn down the heat every time. Because I'm an intense
Yeah,
I mean,
you're an 8. You're an 8. That's all that needs to be said.
I'm an intense guy even though I don't even mean to be it, right? I'm not trying to bully you. I promise.
Going to the dentist is relaxing for you.
Right. My therapist says all the time, Tony, if you're not busy, I'm worried. Right? It's just the way the way my brain works.
Yeah.
Can you go over those questions again? Do you remember them?
Yeah. So the only 3 things you say to your child before they compete or perform or take the test is play hard, have fun, I love you. And the only 3 things you ask them afterwards: did you play hard? Did you have fun? Do you know I love you? And the point of that is the fact that it comes from Mike Matheny, who used to be the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. Is your task as a parent is to be a passive encourager.
Yeah.
And so when in Players Box we talk a lot about the ownership pie. If you own more of that pie than fees, transportation, you're risking it's not their pie. Like even at a quarter of the pie, you own the other 3/4 of the outcome of the pie that goes into the oven of their performance. They still don't feel like they own. And this is why a lot of kids, especially girls, quit in high school. It's like, it never was my pie. Your job is you provide, hey, honey, do you want to play soccer this year? Okay, we'll pay your fees. We'll get your uniform. We'll give you transportation. But the more you let them own the rest of the pie, you know what? I told you to get up, and you didn't get up. You missed practice. That's yours. Because that's your pie. It's not, honey, it's not my pie. It's not my soccer. It's your soccer. I paid for your fee. I mean, I gladly provide the means by which you can participate. But I set your alarm for you. I did that. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I did that because it's your job to get up. And the more you can do that, they may fail, but it was their pie. It wasn't yours. So many kids never feel like it was theirs. They say, I can't believe he quit. It never was theirs. You owned it. When they looked up into the stands and they saw you were more uncomfortable than they were, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is not, the kid's thinking, this is not mine, this is theirs. they're actually playing through me. And just so many of those things that say the best thing you can be is passive and passively encouraging. And that may mean that they don't get a 32 on their ACT. I'm very aware of that. It also may mean that they don't cut. That's what we're seeing today. Yeah. Because so much of the self-destructive behavior that's happening is I got to have control of something. I got to be able to control. There's nothing in my life I have control over. And of course, as we know from a dysfunctional standpoint and health, things like cutting and eating disorders are a byproduct of I have no control over whether I'm enough or not. And it's happening to good people. Like Sherry and I weren't bad people. We just didn't realize the heat, the same heat as you and I have talked before, the same heat, the same fire in me that inspired a church burned my kids.
Yeah, and so with this approach, we're kind of challenging parents to play the long game.
It is.
Because
that's exactly right.
You may miss out on being a 4-year starter at a high school sporting event or being
which
the lead.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? But you will probably create a home that your kids want to come back to.
Yeah, and I would tell you that's what you want. It's spot on, Tony. I couldn't have said it better. That's what you want. And even though we made mistakes that caused some problems between our kids, we have a home now that they want to come back to. I mean, we hang out together. Why? It's because we learned from that. We applied grace. They gave us grace. So many things can still happen that are positive if you'll just take this mindset. And your kids may be in their 20s, but they'll want to come back. And oh, by the way, they're probably going to be pretty successful as the world views that too.
Right.
You know,
right.
And that's the thing is you can't control what they are and how God made them anyway, really. Give it up and let it flesh out. You know, one of the things on an athletic standpoint, for example, you know this, you're around athletics all the time. If they're good enough, they're good enough.
That's right.
If they're not good enough, I don't care how many AAU teams you have them playing on, they're not going to be good enough. It's just the way it is.
That's right.
And in an era when everybody thinks that their kid can be the next Tiger Woods if they're the next Earl, we need that reality.
Yeah.
And so I'm just such a big proponent of the long view. We're not trying to raise successful kids. We're trying to raise God-loving adults.
Hey friends, just pausing this conversation with Charlie to remind you about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes banquet on April 3rd. I want you to have the best possible experience, and so we're giving you a podcast code so that you can save on your registration. So if you go to miamivalleyfca.org/banquet, and when you register, put in the word podcast, you will have a discounted rate. I'm so excited to give this gift to you, my wonderful listeners. If you're in the Miami Valley area, we'd love for you to join us April 3rd, Southbrook Church. Go to miamivalleyfca.org and don't forget to use that code, podcast. Yeah, I'm trying to create a home that my kids want to bring my grandkids to.
That's it.
Right? Because everybody I talk to tells me how awesome grandkids are.
It is. It's so worth it.
Yeah. Now, the player's box seems to me to be what I would label as sneaky Jesus.
It
right?
is.
Because
Yep.
it's you're not like to be clear, if you've never looked up the curriculum or you're not familiar with it, it's much more practical than it is. It's obviously it's rooted in Scripture. I'm not saying that there isn't theological truths in there, but it's not really. This is not like a tool to be like. This is not your normal Sunday night student curriculum.
It's not. So what's really, I think, cool about it is it's a totally inductive approach. So deductive is, here's the statement, Jesus is Lord, and we're going to show you why. Where an inductive approach is your life a mess? In this case, are you feeling pressure that you can't handle? We're going to show you some tools. We're going to give you the bread and the fish of feeding your mind these tools. And oh, by the way, who is that guy that's behind all this? His name is Jesus. And so I am a huge proponent in this era, especially of inductive ministry, inductive teaching, and it is the ultimate. For example, one of our hallmark truths is there is no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear. We literally now know this on a neurological level. Fear and love cannot exist in the human brain at the same time. When you're feeling love, it is physically, neurologically impossible for you to feel fear. So the way to overcome fear and anxiety is not to don't be fearful, don't be fearful. It's bring in love. I love this moment. We teach it. That's 1 John 4:18. We don't put that scripture reference in there. And here's why. I have pastored more Hindu and Buddhist kids and Muslim kids in the last 10 years, because I've predominantly done this at a tennis center, than I ever would have had I had, 1 John 4:18 in the curriculum. I was able to go at Fairmont High School a few weeks ago, their volleyball team, and the coaches who themselves are not opposed, but they're like, we will get in such trouble if you start speaking Jesus to them. I said, don't worry. I'm gonna give them a lesson from Scripture, and they don't even know it. And so I that day I taught. They were facing a tournament game the next day. I taught the I love this moment principle, to embrace the moment. And people watch us. 2 of them said they told their coach they were going to start attending our church. I didn't get up there and say, hey, if you want more information, come to Southbrook services on Sunday. I think the presentation was done in such a way that they said, I want more of this. And guilty is charged with Players Box being somewhere between pre-evangelism and evangelism. But it's the belief that when I walk into a room, when you walk into a room, Jesus is walking into that room, and we can trust that the Holy Spirit will draw. Now, when we have things that we do called open mind gyms that are between Players Box sessions, and we go much more deeply into the relationship rooted in Christ in that, because that's the 201, 301 level.
And you're going to create space in this building that you can basically...
That's exactly right.
To do that, right?
That's what we're going to do. So in this building, we're going to have there's 2 parts to this ministry. There's the part that we'll take our team out to Fairmont High School, and we'll come at 3:30 on Wednesday afternoon for 12 weeks, and we'll lead your team. That's different than you... Coach Tony is leading a group of 6 basketball players, and they have 3 components to their gatherings every week. They do a Players Box mental skill training. They do their ball handling drills, and they pray together. That's what you do. That's your group. This week, all platforms, arts, academics, athletics, are learning big U, little u principle. But you guys are doing ball handling. The volleyball crew is doing different skill development. both of you will be learning the same thing. Both of you will be praying with those kids. And our intention, is it starts next fall, is that you start with that group when they're in 4th grade. And however many of them want to journey through, man, you're at their graduation party.
Yeah.
And that's the relational aspect. When kids are shown love and truth, I mean, I don't know. I bet I've had a dozen kids that we've baptized through Players Box before it ever started here. Because it's got to know me. They got to know me through what I was doing at the time at South Regency. Now I do it at 5 Seasons. But, it's still, hey, show us Jesus. And maybe it's more so that. And so you give them bread and fish. Jesus had no illusion that giving people bread and fish was going to save their soul. But it was a means for them to sit on the hill and go, you're meeting my hierarchy of needs here. Take me to another level. And definitely we see that with Players Box. We have gotten from our own people pushback. There's not enough Jesus in this.
I'm sure Christians are always going to have a problem.
Exactly. Jesus, I have a problem with his sermons because there was too many stories and not enough scripture. And Jesus, that idea that something's biblical, if it has more verses and more. Well, this is a different era, man. We're sitting in Athens now. We're not in Jerusalem. We're in Athens.
Oh, okay, unpack that, because I know what you mean, but I think there's probably a lot of people listening who don't know that reference, and I think it's really important because you're kind of turning your church into a rec center. We are. That's it. And we even if there was any pushback, it was, aren't there enough YMCAs in the area? Why do we need this? Here's why. We can't do at the Y what we can do here, and that is when Paul in Acts 17 went into Athens. He looked at their hundreds of idols, and they even had an idol to an unknown God, and that was in case they missed one. And he looked at it, he goes, let me talk to you about that unknown God. I'm going to tell you about him. And he spoke from the poets that they had. He spoke from their culture, and through that, inductively led them into a dialogue about Jesus of Nazareth. And that's what we're doing here. We're saying, Don't come to our building and we'll tell you about Jesus. We're saying we're coming to you in the context of your pressure. And let's talk to you about, in this culture, I didn't mean it this way, but in this culture, performance is an idol, and success and all that. Let's talk on that basis. And let's just see what's available in truth. And in that building of that relationship, you will find Jesus because he will come up in our conversation at some point. We will have a relationship where we can't help but speak to you of his truth and his reality. And eventually, Players Box leads to Philippians 4:13. That's eventually what it leads, because every truth that we speak, I love this moment, big you, little you, they're all truths about the power of the same power that raised Jesus from the dead now lives in you also. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I mean, at the end of the day, Players Box is really just about creating grit, the grit of Jesus. And some mental resiliency that's based in the biblical truth, right? Because you're teaching coping mechanisms.
That's exactly what you are. Hupomene, the Greek word for overcoming, is really the one word that we're building into kids. I am of the firm belief that as soon as you can, you start training kids on how to manage pain. Because that's why we have an addiction problem in our culture is more than ever, we're protecting kids from pain, not teaching them how to manage it, how to process it in a healthy way. I don't think, even love, you say, well, wait a minute, is that more important than love? Well, is not love, part of that is processing pain. To love is to hurt. And at the end of the day, Players Box is really equipping kids to deal with loss and disappointment and pain, not shield them from it.
And so in one regard, what you're doing is you're taking the parents and you're saying, okay, parents, step back and let your kids experience pain, because what we've seen over the last several decades is our inclination, mine included, to lean in and say, no, don't hurt my kid, don't hurt my kid, I want my kid. And so as a parent, I hear that, and my initial thought was, man, I wonder what do you tell parents to do with the shame of, like, maybe I've been parenting wrong for the last decade?
We talk about that a lot in the parent section because we make them confess, I have fallen short, and confess their shame over that because I'm an expert in it. And so we really, one of the sessions, I think it's like the third session, we really bring that out strongly. By this point, you're feeling guilty because you've screwed up. And just get that out. This is not about focusing on your screw-ups, because to be a parent is to screw up. And we joke about the fact that just trust your kids won't make your mistakes. They'll make complete opposite ones that are their own.
Right.
Because they won't do what you did.
Right.
They'll make their own that are the swinging the pendulum to the other direction.
And they're still going to be connected to you just like
That's
yours
exactly
are connected
right.
to their
That's exactly
parents.
right. You know, and the next generation will be dealing with things that their generation didn't deal with. And just like our generation dealt with things that our parents' generation didn't deal with. And so we really are very aware of that shame that we feel. You know, I didn't mean to overheat with my kids, but I got sucked into that AAU culture. I did. And I mean, I remember Austin telling me one time, he said, yeah, when I was in fourth grade, all I cared about was where we were going for pizza afterward. And he said, sometimes I'd be in practice and I'm getting strongly encouraged to pick up my effort and thinking to myself, a half an hour ago, I was swinging in our backyard. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? And that's how fourth graders are thinking. You think it's the most important thing ever. They're going, where are we going for ice cream afterward? And you said the word earlier, Tony, back off. Back off of that. It seems counterintuitive, and you'll actually, hold on loosely, but don't let go. You don't let go. It doesn't mean, hey, they're going to have to find their own way. You just provide what you can provide, financial support, transportation, etc., and then let it go from there. We've got to do it because we're destroying a whole generation. And if you get to session 3 in our curriculum and you realize that you've done that, that's okay. I didn't realize it until my kids were 20, 21 years old, and it still wasn't too late for me to confess and to say, I'm so sorry. And, we're still learning. We're still learning. We're still growing as a family. And I'm still confessing my mess ups, and making amends.
Does that become just part of your normal family routine now? I mean, is it almost like, hey, we're all going to just put our swords on? I mean, now you're all adults, obviously. Mm-hmm. You've got grandkids, though, and so you're probably redoing it a little bit differently there. But is it like, it feels like it would have less power the more often you do it?
I mean, hopefully you're not doing it every week,
right.
There's that. But I would say this. I would say, it was funny, my daughter Jordan does a lot of creative stuff with our creative arts team. And when we had this fall started planning for our family to do that video that you saw about our story, I did that with really assuming she would do it. And she was hurt by that. And she said something to me. She goes, Dad, when you get into efficiency mode, I feel like you run right over me. Man, did I need to hear that.
Wow.
That's exactly it. You're the same way. I get into efficiency mode. It's get the job done. And I'm starting a campaign, get the job done. I got 1,000 decisions I got to make today. I got to, be the point in raising $4 million at the end of a pandemic. This is really challenging. And I'm just going, click off, Jordan doing that video. Click it off. Just check it off Well, I didn't really say, hey, I know this is going to be painful. Would you be willing to do it? Which would have honored her journey more. So here she is. She's 31, 32 years old. We had to have a session where I said, thank you. Thank you for that, because you were right. I was being Mr. Efficiency Man. And I just run right over people close to me when I do that.
So as you've now taught this to hundreds of students, is there anything that you've learned about God in this process that you didn't know going in? Like maybe you had some thoughts about, but like what's teaching Players Box how to depressurize adolescence taught you about Jesus?
Well, I do think I have a theory that essentially you see over and over the Lord saying through Jesus, I've taken care of the big stuff. Now live. Don't major in minors. And by the way, most of life is minors. the major things, seek first my rule, seek first my righteousness, and all these other things will be given to you as well. I mean, and I think that's the big thing I've learned is, in the words of the spiritual documentary Meatballs, with Bill Murray, I reference that a lot. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Remember that?
Yeah.
And he's this whacked out camp counselor, and as you look back, you realize all that stuff you thought mattered really doesn't matter. What matters is love. That's what matters. Is just love's still the greatest power in the world to achieve and to forgive. I mean, it has recovery power in every realm. It has empowerment in every realm. And if we'll just let that play out, if your child is good at something but they don't love it, it doesn't matter if they're good at it, because at some point they're not going to want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But if they're not that good at something but they love it, it doesn't matter that they're not good at it because they love it. Our grandson's not a very good swimmer right now. I hope he's not listening to this.
We don't hit that demographic.
I don't. You're not hitting 9-year-olds.
No, not 9-year-olds.
but he just loves it. He just loves it. And I love going and watching him, because I don't know a thing about swimming other than what I've done in the pool.
Sure.
And that's what matters. And if today you hear this and you go, okay, that's not what I thought, but I'm going to believe that, good for you. If you hear this and you go, nah, in this family we succeed, there's a really good chance someday you'll be calling me going, you were right. We got a lot of repairing to do. I'm just saying there's a good chance. Or your child will spend their life drinking because they're going to have to numb the pain somehow.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, I know that people are going to want to get connected to Players Box. They're going to want to sign their kids up. They're going to want to sign themselves up. Yeah. Where's the best place to go to get to get all the info?
So our church is southbrook.org. And then on that, there's a Players Box tab. You can go directly to playersbox.org. There's a website for that. Our next session is February 1st. It's a 6-week session. It includes a middle school, a high school, and a parent training that is commensurate 6:30 to 7:30 for middle school, 6:30 to 8 for high school. So it goes longer for the high schoolers. Middle schoolers don't want to talk as much. High schoolers they're into talking, and usually. And so that'll run 6 weeks, and we'd love to have them. We're doing something different with this one. We're going to target certain coaches to say, hey, bring your volleyball team, bring your cross country team, bring your soccer team. In other words, it's winter, so those sports aren't in session.
Yeah.
Bring your whole team. We'll teach them this tribal speak that'll become a part of your culture as a group, and it'll really help your kids in the moment when they're the ones that are kicking the penalty goal. How do I deal with that pressure? You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Okay, last question I always love to ask people is an advice question. And I'm going to ask you to give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the time or the time in your life when it happened, right?
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you to go back and to speak to that younger version of you the day that your son walked away from basketball.
It was the darkest day of my life from the standpoint that he also confessed that he'd been using drugs. And I would have done it the way I did it. One thing that I'll tell parents is this: I did something right. I know it sounds like when I talk, like, man, he just screwed up in every way. Why are we listening to him? One thing I did right was I definitely said, here's why I think you shouldn't quit. But we didn't sever the love that had been built over 16 years. So when he started getting tattoos, which, oh, by the way, I paid for essentially, and I don't like tattoos.
Right.
No offense to anyone who's tattooed, but that's just not something I understand. I didn't go, what are you doing spending my money? You know what? He was alive.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if he had his body covered in tattoos. It didn't matter. And so I think the one thing that I would tell myself again is listen a lot and talk very little. I did the only times I regret are the times where I said things that were simplistic axioms or maxims that were so generalized, like, our family has big egos. Well, I could still remember being at Cheesecake Factory in Kenwood saying that to my kids when we're at dinner, and it's like, it hurt them so much. Like, why do that? There were times like that, but most of the time I just kept my mouth shut.
Wow.
And I'm so glad that I didn't sever the relationship just on the basis that they weren't doing what I think they should do. And especially Austin, who was doing some things that were really against, he knew, our values. He was really what's psychologically called differentiating in every way to gain his own sense of self. And I would tell parents, if their room's dirty and messy, I know, I love a clean room too, but the big thing you got to do if your child's struggling, keep them alive.
Yeah.
Keep them alive. And that means you give up money, and you probably ended up paying for some tattoos. You did. I'm not saying you have to pay for drugs. I'm glad I did that. I'm glad that I would give my advice again, that when we were sitting on those bleachers at Centerville Soccer Stadium and Austin tells me that I thank God I would have responded the way I did. I would do it again. Just listen. Say, hey, I'm with you. And you leave the door open for love to win.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Charlie, I appreciate the time today, the generosity. And
appreciate you, Tom.
For all the times you poured into me over the last couple of years, and can't wait to see what God does with this.
Thank you, bud.
Guys, I just love Charlie and his spirit, and on a personal note, he has been such a good friend to me, mentoring me on what it means to lead a movement, and he always has time for me, which I deeply appreciate. So do me a favor, check out his website, Players Box. Check out what Southbrook is doing in their ministry. Get connected with them all over the socials. And if you have a student athlete or an academic or an artist at home, someone who might be feeling the extra pressure of life, I want to invite you to connect with them so that we can all grow together. More than anything, I want you to remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.